must be a shock to you that we're still discussing Arbites, one whole week after his launch, right? But this one is a discussion that I've seen a ton of people having already online, so I think it's important that I pull up my big boy galoshes and wade into the discussion and give my authoritative opinion. And then you guys can all copy my opinion and we can all say that we're correct. No, that's not what we're doing here. I'm going to kind of play both sides today. I'm going to give you like the most reasonable understanding of where this issue is at. And if you read the thumbnail, if you understand the title, you know what I'm talking about. Is Arbites OP? That's what I want to break down today. And I don't want to just answer that simple, stupid question, is he OP, right? That's an opinion, right? What I want to do is quantify what it means to be overpowered within a game like Darktide. Maybe there's a couple different quantifications that can be done. In fact, there are, by my approximation. And then the second thing is to address the reality of the situation. If he is, in fact, declared to be overpowered by the community at large, does that mean that Fatshark will do anything about it? Because I think this is where the terminus to the conversation leads, where the debate ultimately culminates. If he is deemed to be overpowered and players are dissatisfied with it, then Fatshark could swoop in and nerf him. Even if players are satisfied with it and Fatshark thinks he's overpowered, they could swoop in and nerf him or buff other things to be as powerful as him. And so I wanted to kind of break down the odds, or sort of my thoughts on what the likelihood is of some actions like that. Because I understand there is a lot of apprehension in the community right now to not get too attached to the good boy that we have and how strong this class is, because of the fear of the other boot dropping. Because I'm having so much fun with my Cyber Mastiff, and tomorrow you'll wake up and it'll be like a Cyber Chihuahua because they like decided that was too fucking good, right? They're gonna nerf this guy into the ground and it's just gonna be a waste of time to get good at him now. I don't think that's the case, but I won't spoil my opinion too much. Let's talk about this. And by the way, before I start, if you enjoy this sort of analytical breakdown discussion format content, if you enjoy Darktide, this is definitely the channel for you. I love doing this stuff. Ramble videos, yapping like this is where I am at, and I love Darktide. And this channel will always be 100% committed to Darktide as like at least 95% of the content. So your subscription is safe with me. I'm not going to betray you and go to Helldivers like so many others that came before me. So let's get on here. Is the Arbites OP? And this is where I ask my first question. How do we define OP, overpowered? I think there are two important definitions to lay out here and address. The definitions are going to apply differently to two separate groups of people as I see it. The first group of people that I think is important to quantify overpoweredness for is middle level players or low experience players, which is what I'll call them. When you are a low experience player, you have a fundamentally different interaction with the game than I do, and because I am in the second cohort of players, the top 1% of players, or top level players as I'll call them. Those top level players have a fundamentally different understanding of what it means to be overpowered, because they are interacting with this game with a different set of goals for how they're going to derive enjoyment from it. And remember, at the end of the day, the goal for the balance of this game, for whether a thing is overpowered or underpowered, yada yada yada, the goal is to make the most enjoyable game for all players. So if everything is overpowered and players are having a great time, and both fronts, both those low experience players and top players are having a great time, then there is no problem and nothing needs to be done. But it starts to become a problem when one of those cohorts of players, either the very devoted players or the less experienced players, is having a bad time with the thing, and it becomes a very strong problem when both cohorts of players are voicing opinions that like, oh my god, this is fucking busted. So let's first start with those mid-level-ish, low-experience players. What is the operative definition of overpowered when you are a player in this cohort? For the players in this cohort, I think that the OP factor is when you compare something to other things, it's their peers, right? So a class, a weapon, or anything really in the game, it's only considered too powerful, overpowered, when it's compared to its peers, its equals. And if the other choices are less valid by comparison. When you're a player that's lower in that skill or experience distribution, the benefit for Fatshark and the balance side of things is it can actually be hard enough for these players to tell which is the best thing, right? Because they aren't playing optimally. They aren't making the most efficient builds. They aren't choosing the right perks on certain weapons, and they don't know how to use the weapons the right way, right? So there's the waters are very muddy. There's a lot of wiggle room here. So generally, what I believe is that when the disparities between the options that you have, say like all of the melee weapons on a certain class, or all of the ultimate options of a certain class, are within reason, are within reason balanced against each other, lower skill, lower experience players can't reasonably tell the difference between them, and they'll continue to play with a worse option, which in this sense is actually a good thing, because it increases diversity in play styles, right? That's a good thing. An example I would give here would be for the recon lasgun marks, right? For experienced players, we have probably gone to the Psychanium and shot at a target and seen what sort of damage that thing does over time, gotten the right blessings on the gun, making certain that we understand which talents, which blessings are going to drive the damage from. We've compared the different marks and looked at, okay, this one holds this many ammo and it costs this many per shot, and this is the amount of damage you can do with a full ammo capacity. That sort of thing is all testing that upper level players do to understand like what is the most optimal stuff. Lower level players would never. If you gave players who'd put 50, 100 hours in the game the 3 different recon lasgun marks and told them to figure out which is the best, you would have 4 different opinions, right? There would be no way that they would be able to determine which one is the best just casually playing with them, because they're close enough, right? But then you have differences between abilities and options that are egregiously different. And at that point, even very inexperienced players start to be able to tell the difference and identify things that are overpowered compared to underpowered. A great example of this is a shout vet versus any other type of vet, right? Players that play at low levels, they start with Executioner Stance on Veteran, they ascend through the talent tree, they probably go and pick Executioner Stance as one of their first abilities if they are generally inexperienced, because it's a cool sounding ability and it's what you're used to playing with, and you play with it for a while, right? But the first time that someone tells you, hey, you should play with Shout, or you see someone in your game playing with Shout and you realize that, oh my god, I can't take any damage on this difficulty, I am invincible, and you just guaranteed win every game from there on out, you change to Shout and you never look back, because you suddenly realize that this thing is so much better than the alternative that it's making me win a quantifiable amount more. Even low experienced players can tell the difference between how effective it is to play as the Shout veteran versus to play as the Infiltrator Executioner Stance veteran. And the worry here for Arbites is that he might be powerful enough that he is exceeding that threshold, like the Shout vet compared to the Executioners. As compared to other classes, players might feel powerful enough that they'll notice that they're winning much more frequently because he is that powerful, and then they won't look back. So what we might be seeing is, right now the fucking Morningstar is being invaded by Arbites, right? But what we might be seeing is, with these new tens of thousands of players that are now joining the game, that a good portion of them, like 40% of them, are now going to be Arbites players for life, because they have gotten accommodated. This is the first class they picked up. It's very powerful, and if they try to go off of it and go to like Psyker, they're going to get their ass absolutely whooped. And then they'll go back to Arbites and they'll stay on Arbites because he's powerful enough, because he has power that can carry players who are lower on the experience sort of curve. So why is the Arbites powerful for these low experience players? Why does he give them this experience? Well, to me, I think that is because he's really, really hard to fuck up on. And I don't just mean fuck up when you're playing the game, I mean fuck up on a meta level. By which I mean there is a really, really low chance that you will put your 30 talent points into Arbites and make a wrong build. You can literally just spend every talent point in the whole top of the tree and go on down from there and pick a random class ability, and it will be a valid build because there's so much damage and so much toughness, especially that toughness regeneration at the top of the tree. There's so many quality talents and very low numbers of like dead talents that it's pretty damn easy to make a viable build on this class, even if you have no clue what you're fucking looking at. And the same thing applies to his weapons. He has a very narrow weapon selection, especially on the melee side of things, but almost all of his melee options are very, very viable. The least viable one is the chainsword, and that sword, that's fine, honestly, in lower difficulties. But if you choose anything else, we're looking at A tier weapons at the least, and all those other options are very, very strong. And as compared to other classes where you might end up playing with like, the Devil's Claw sword and you don't have the skill to parry with it, you're going to be fucked if you're using that. But if you just grab the RBD Shock Maul, the weapon that it just gives you straight off the bat, and you play straight through to level 30 with that, you will just clobber everything in your way, right? So he's set up to succeed by having a good amount of front-loaded power, plus you get that dog bot that's going to help you, sort of inherently when you're a low-skill player. That dog is going to be a absolute lifesaver, like getting dogs off of you when you can't, saving you from stuff, killing enemies that you might have missed that are trying to sneak up behind you. He's really good at that. So he is he's got the training wheels on. He's got a lot of training wheels on his class. Now, I don't think he's the greatest violator in this front. I've made videos before about which class I think is the most egregious violator of the low-skill, absolute steamroll everything train, and that's the Ogren. But we'll get back to him on a later date. So that is sort of how I feel for those low to mid-level players. It's that the class only becomes overpowered in a problematic way when he's so overpowered that players are like, why the fuck would I ever want to play a veteran? Why the fuck would I ever want to play a psyker? Those classes are way too fucking hard, and I do less damage on them, right? That is, or I feel like I'm doing less damage because these people don't have a scoreboard. They're just playing by feels. So that's how those players interact with it. For top players, on the other hand, they have a different fundamental way of defining what is overpowered. Overpowered in a top-level performance sense refers to comparing the power of your class, of whatever amalgamation of classes you have, against the challenges the game can pose. So since the goal at the highest levels of play is to really push your skills and overcome those great challenges, I don't know a single high-level player who doesn't enjoy the challenge that the game poses, who's like, oh my god, Havoc is just stupid hard, like it's not even fun because they just made it so hard. No. We're like, please add Havoc 60, right? We're ready for this, okay? I need some more of that in my veins. And the threat here is that if you have something that is strong enough in certain ways, you will no longer have to push your skills to overcome challenge. This thing, if you have whatever tool it is, whether it's a weapon or a blitz ability or a class as a whole, if it trivializes the challenge, it's going to cheapen and devalue your accomplishment of overcoming something. So this is sort of why the sentiment on the dueling sword, for instance, at very high levels of play is, I've never heard anything to the contrary, so I'm going to go ahead and say unanimously, nerf that son of a bitch. It's anti-fun. It overshadows other more interesting options, and it makes the challenging content in the game really not feel as engaging, because it's not a very engaging or interesting weapon to play with, and it is also the strongest weapon. So you end up just like, face rolling through stuff and not even having fun doing it. So would I consider Arbites overpowered on this metric? Would he be overpowered in the sense of, he invalidates some of the challenge of the upper level experience, like Havoc 40 challenge? I would give a more tentative yes than I did before, right? He is not the worst offender in this case, Ogren. Skilled players, they understand the game fundamentally, and they understand how to exploit powerful weapons and strategies. So when a class has a broken weapon or a broken talent, like absurd power outliers, players see them immediately and they find them and they abuse them. So when players got their hands on this class and they saw the talent concussive and they saw that Crusher has, Skull Crusher as a talent on it, they immediately put 2 and 2 together and said, oh my god, this is fucking insane. Right now, this class can stagger, in air quotes, bosses without actually staggering them and just dunk on them hard as fuck. There's so many different things that you can look at in the talent tree as a skilled player and be like, that's not balanced. But maybe it's more about fun than being balanced. The problem is when you reach those really, really absurd power outliers that make it anti-fun. So skilled players, again, they realized a while ago that certain abilities that exist in the game already, like Shroud Field, for example, are broken. And Shroud Field is a perfect example of an anti-fun ability, right? It completely circumvents the way that the game is intended to be played. And therefore, like players that challenge themselves to solo runs, a lot of times, they might do a run with stealth for speed purposes, but they will then challenge themselves to actually fight their way through the levels and engage with the game as is intended to. So that is the threat here, is if there is something that rises to that level where it invalidates what's supposed to be an aspect of the game, an aspect of the combat puzzle that you're solving, the thing that actually makes the game fun when you're a high-level player, that's the danger. So personally, I wouldn't say that Arbites is anti-fun. Much to the contrary, I think he's probably the most fun class right now. I have a lot of fun playing as Ogryn, and I have a lot of fun playing as Arbites. But I think that Arbites has more different ways to play, and that is fun. But he is kind of broken, especially in these high-level games, which brings up the question, for these high-level players, where is he deriving his power from? And the answer is pretty blunt and obvious. It's stagger. Stagger is a huge problem. Well, I mean, it's a solution for the Arbites, but it's a problem for the enemies. When you're going up against the likes of Ogryn and Arbites, they have modifiers to stagger damage, increasing damage that enemies take when they're staggered. They capitalize hugely on enemies that are entered into that stagger state, and they do an amazing job at doing it. The thing that is problematic about stagger from a game balance perspective and from a keeping that upper level of competition actually competitive and challenging perspective is that it is both offensive and defensive in nature, right? Once you've staggered enemies, they are now taking a massively increased amount of damage. They are wide open. Like take a Bulwark, for example, right? You can't deal any damage to him when he's got his shield up. But as soon as you stagger him, he is now just wide open. He's showing his whole belly and he's ready to get destroyed in like 1 or 2 seconds. Same thing applies to Crushers. As soon as they aren't threatening you with that overhead, they are just a big lump of hit points to destroy. And so if you can stagger everything, it can't hurt you. So then you can just lean all of the rest of your stuff into defense or into offense. So basically what I'm saying is if your offense is strong enough and you can stagger with your offense, then you don't even need to have any defenses. I would show as a sort of comparison to this and taking it to its logical extremes, Ogrenheimer as an example, right? If you're familiar with my Rumbler taunt Bully Club Mark III, like everything, all of the most egregiously overpowered things you can stack on the Ogryn class all together in one package, it's not that the class is like overpoweredly tanky or anything, it's just that no enemies can do anything against the class because if they enter into a vicinity of 50 feet of him, they start getting non-stop staggered by grenade explosions and taunts and Bully Club slams. And that is just like, it just ends encounters. It is just completely too powerful for the game that it is in. So that is sort of the problem that the Arbites class has, is it is a absolute stagger powerhouse. Even without choosing the charge abilities, you can just stagger the fuck out of every enemy in the game, and then you've got all the damage to capitalize on that. So he just is very, very powerful on this front, and I think it would take like a big rework to how the game systems work on that front to make stagger not be like crazy valuable. So that sort of sums up how I feel about him being OP on both these fronts. I don't think that lower to mid-level players are going to have a problem with Arbites right now. I don't think that it's quite gotten there yet. I think that, like, how do I say this? I think that he is probably much more obviously overpowered at the high levels of play as compared to, you know, your other humanoid classes like the veteran or whatever. And the middle level players are just reveling in how powerful he is right now. They're just having a good time. And that's where I want to get to the last question to ask, which is, will Fatshark nerf this class? I don't know. Probably not, I would say, right? It seems like the future goal of Darktide is to power up all the classes one by one to be like this, right? Because we went and we did Ogren up like a lot, right? For them to do what they did with Ogren and bring him from where he was to bring him to where he is now is maybe the most insane buffs we've ever seen in the game, short of what they did with the dueling sword in patch 14 or whatever it was, and they doubled every single stat about it. And Ogren might even be greater than that. So the Ogren is insanely powerful now. And the Arbites follows in his footsteps. It has a very engaging and well thought out talent tree that is stuffed with powerful nodes, and you are getting damage from fucking everywhere. It's falling out of your pockets as you build your talent tree. It feels like the goal must be to revitalize and go back through all the classes and bring them to this new standard, because these skill trees are way more well thought out and strong and you know, diversified than what we had at the game's inception. So if they're going to be powering up all these classes to this level, if we're going to have, you know, a bunch of Ogrens and Arbites power level running around, then there needs to be something else that gives, right? It's not going to be that troubling for mid-level players. I think mid-level players are just going to have a great fucking time. They're like, oh my god, I can play Zealot now, and I can use the Eviscerator, and it's like the best weapon in the class. Awesome, yay, I'm having so much fun. I love using the chainsword, etc. Like, they're going to have fun no matter what, especially when the power is being given, more power is being given to them. But for top players, it begins to get troubling, because if everybody's as powerful as the Ogren is, you're going to have to make more Havoc difficulties, right? It's going to completely invalidate the challenge that the game can pose right now. And I think, personally, instead of nerfing this class, and by extension, they would have to nerf Ogren, because, like, this class is not as egregious as Ogren, in my opinion. I think it's much more likely that Fatshark will introduce new threats and new challenges. You know, one thing that comes to me off the top of my head is Gene Stealers, right? They've been sort of teased forever, and this is a thing that they did in Vermintide 2, right? When players started to get more powerful because they were getting better and better weapons and their gear was going up, they introduced Beastmen, and Beastmen were sons of fucking bitches. They had the most annoying fucking lunge attacks in the world. You had the fucking Minotaur that you couldn't shake his charge to the worst. It was like the worst boss in the world. It's going to kick your ass off the map no matter what you do. And then, of course, you've got the banner guys. Of course, you've got the charge dudes. Like, the Beastmen were an absolute pain to fight against as compared to the enemies that we had. But that, in itself, increased the challenge of the game enough that the slight power creep that we were incurring by players figuring out and getting better at the game, and also a couple of the DLC weapons, was reverted in an instant, because Beastmen were so strong that they actually made the game way harder to play into. So that's sort of what I think I would do in their shoes, is let's go ahead and give everyone a nice buff up, make them good and powerful. Let's get them all to this nice new standard of power. And then what we can do is we can come back in and say, all right, Havoc goes to 50 now, and it's fucking crazy those last 10 levels, and there's a new like enemy type that is just really, really tricky to play around, and that will keep those players challenging and keep the experience fresh for them. Because you have to respect both groups of players, right? You have to respect the low mid-level players who just want buffs, buffs, buffs all the time because it's fun to be overpowered, it's fun to be powerful. They want to push Auric Damnation even if they're not totally ready for it. And you have to appease to the players at the top of the bracket who are your lifelong devotees who put 2,500 plus hours into this game and, you know, are running a YouTube channel based entirely around it, right? You have to respect them too, so they don't feel like their achievements have been stolen by new, more powerful things being printed that invalidate all the stuff they did back in my day when the game was actually fucking hard. Right, so that's sort of what I feel here. That would be the play that would allow them to keep both groups happy. The mid players would be having the fucking time of their lives and living out their power fantasies, and sweats like me would still have something to bash our heads against. So that's sort of how I think they'll go about it. And just to kind of give, show my homework here, is cite my sources. If we look back, players that are saying that Fatshark's going to nerf this class, I think you are vastly overestimating the amount that Fatshark nerfs anything. And this is something that I've seen a number of times. It's like Fatshark just nerfs and nerfs and nerfs. I don't know who these people are confusing Fatshark with. I think maybe they're confusing them with like Arrowhead's, Helldivers devs or something. Fatshark has nerfed something like 2 times in existence, and it's always the fucking veteran that gets the boot, right? It was the it was the plasma sword, the power sword, right off the bat in the game. And I think that's what players are latching onto and remembering, is that the plasma sword got nerfed in about the second month of the game, and people fucking lost their goddamn minds. That thing was stupid OP by today's metric, but back in the day, there really wasn't that many good weapons at all, and this thing would cut down crushers with a single light attack. It was fucking stupid. So they nerfed it, and players got so pissed mad they brigaded the Steam ratings and dropped it to very unfavorable. Well, the game probably deserved some of that, not the brigading, but a bad rating on launch. But that was one nerf, and then anything in recent memory has pretty much just been the nerfs to survivalist for the veteran, so that it's not just like the guaranteed bring this into every Havoc ever, solve your Havoc ammo issues aura. And I think that's about it, right? Everything else I can think of that they made a significant change to, like the changes to the Zealot talent tree where they redid Invocation of Death, have ended up ultimately being buffs. All the new classes, Ogren rework, buff. This new class, definitely buff over, no class, but definitely buff over the comparative classes. What did they just do to 7 of the weapons in the game? Buff. And they're going to do it to a bunch of other weapons, and they're only just vaguely talking about nerfing 2 other weapons. So on the grand scheme of things, they like to buff a lot more than they like to nerf. And guess which one of those makes players happy? It's the buffing. And guess which one of the making players happy or making players pissed off sells games and sells DLCs? It's making the players happy. So they're going to buff. They're going to buff stuff, and they're going to introduce new things that are going to make it more challenging and engaging, so they can keep those players around who are getting bored at the higher level. That's my opinion anyway. Anyway, guys, wow. That was a good 28 minutes there. Solid. Let me know what you think about this down in the comments. Is he OP? Maybe you don't think he's OP. What do you think is the most OP thing about the Arbites? What's the most OP talent or build or whatever it is? And what would you do to change it? Let me know down there. I'll think on it, and it might be in my next video if you have a good enough opinion. All right. Thanks very much for watching, guys, and have a really good day. Mr. Yell. Bye.